on some Bondo, painted over it, and called it a day. But whatever.
It is rough.
Phil, I mean, mine actually.
I say as I look at my fender. One of the few things I was unable to obtain exactly what I wanted from ISP West were these pushrod tube seals. And so I found them somewhere else and grabbed these silicone versions that will hopefully be, you know, better than your average. I've gone around to the perimeter of the end of each tube and made sure that they're relatively smooth, no burrs or anything. There are burrs on the inside of this, and I don't think that's really going to matter. The push rod's never going to come into contact with that burr, and you know, the only thing it's really going to do is maybe keep a little bit of oil trapped in there. It won't, you know, flow out quite as easily, and I just don't think that's really going to be a concern. If, you know, a few drops of oil not being able to make it out easily, it makes the difference, then, you know, we got bigger problems with design. The other thing here is we've got seams on these tubes, and so naturally we want those to point up. So I'm gonna turn that around that way, rest it into here, and then of course when I place the head on and actually start to manipulate these into place, I'll make sure that they're exactly where I want them at that time. I'm quite sure an experienced engine builder would have a much better way of doing this. I wasn't too terribly concerned. I didn't bother to try to look it up. I just went ahead and stuck fingers down into each one of these holes to kind of keep the tubes in place while I was getting the head from close to actually, you know, making contact with the pushrod tubes and making sure they stayed aligned and, you know, didn't get the edges of them squashed down or anything by, you know, having them misaligned. And seems to have worked pretty well. So that's all in position. I've moved the seams slightly on 3 of the tubes. One was perfect to keep them all right on the top. So now it's time to just get to torquing. Washers are directional. Change my mind. Now these washers, you can see it if you know, really get a decent look at it. The bottom of the washer is slightly wider. I don't really necessarily want to call it a taper exactly, but it does seem to kind of be rounded on the top edge here. And, you know, even your stamped washers, I won't even go into it, but yes, washers are directional. Mostly, you know, there are some that are actually identical on both sides, but not usually. Another thing I'm going to do here, these washers were inside where the rocker is. Yeah, these were outside, so they're going to stay outside. There's a bit of a same kind of a deal with these nuts. You know, you see that surface. That surface has clearly been used against the washer, and this one doesn't really look so much like it. And if we flip it, yeah, that's the side we want to go down against the washer. So we'll just do that same thing again. I feel good about the orientation of the tubes and the way the seals are fitting into their receptacles. So time to start torquing these things down. And we're going to start with 15 pounds, see how that feels, and then take it to 23. Starting down here at 1, which is to the right of the center. There we go. Number 2 up here. Number 3 back down here. Number 4. Now, let's just go over these again. That one went some more. 3, that went a little bit. 8, great. All right. Let's just get crazy and get all the way to 23. Starting with 1. 8. Now, back to 1. Let's check it. Tiny bit of movement. You get the idea.
If you're doing a straight torque reading and not a torque plus angle, which is never a thing on a classic Volkswagen, you want to go around it at least a couple of times.
There's an O-ring missing here. It definitely didn't come off with the hardware. Pulled this dude. Oh yeah, sure enough, this guy was like fully stuck to it. And it's not in great condition. It's not the worst. This washer spacer, it's kind of got a raised burr here, and I think I'm just going to knock that down. That was down on the side of the O-ring. So like, what do you expect? Yeah, that's going to jack up your O-ring. Like, what the hell, dude? Don't people pay attention to this stuff? It drives me nuts when I see things like this. Took a pretty good look at the rocker assembly here. Everything basically looks like it should. So I'm just going to drop her back in. Moving on to the other side, I couldn't help but notice this spot around this spark plug, so I decided to pull the plug, get a better look at it. And, you know, it looks like very little, if any, oil is actually getting into the combustion chamber through the spark plug hole. But there is oil here. And, well, okay, but where in the hell is it coming from? I haven't sprayed this head at all. Like, where's that oil coming from? I don't get it. It's a mystery. To a large degree, this side was basically just a repeat of the other side, except, hi kitty cat, no washer in between the rockers and the base here. I don't know whether he was maybe building up the other side to get a perfect geometry, or, you know, if it's just another inconsistent thing on the engine build. But yeah, anyway, it's been running really good, so I'm not super concerned about, you know, getting into that level of detail on this. And, you know, between you and me, I actually kind of have designs on possibly building up another motor anyway. So, you know, having the engine be good enough is good enough for me. So we're just going to kind of clean things up, stop the oil leaks, put it back together. As if there wasn't enough inconsistency already, pulling these washers from the 4 studs that are on the outside on the head. These 2 end ones are super thick and the inside ones are thinner. Okay, maybe that makes good sense, but why not the other side? Why just this side? Just crazy. I've got the valves set on this side, and it's time to put to use one of the items I decided to go ahead and go a little extra on. Got these high quality silicone valve cover gaskets. So put one of these to use, flip it over, do the other valves, use the other gasket. I just got finished using a razor blade to clean this surface up real good. I imagine probably most people that do this work already know to use a razor blade, but if you didn't already know it, now you do. Use it. Now, it's real easy to make a mistake with a razor blade. You do have to be very careful, not just with, you know, slicing yourself open real good, but also gouging your metal. But if you are careful and, you know, get your angles just right and take it slow, there's just nothing that does such a good job. And so being done with that, I decided I'd go ahead and get the base of this. And man, it's not good enough to have a razor blade clean it up. So I'm going to be using my surface plate once I clear it off, and some sandpaper, and getting it ready that way instead. So that's another nice trick. And if you don't have a surface plate, actually this surface plate right here, it's, you know, not really all that big. I forget, I did not pay a lot for it, and the tolerances were great. You know, it's, yeah, it was cheap, you know, it's not like some fancy name or something, but it's been very, very good for everything I've used it for. So I'll use it on this. If you don't have one of those, you know, I've heard like a thick piece of glass. I don't know where you find a thick piece of glass, but you know, there's other things that you can do if you don't have a surface plate. But man, if you don't have one, buy one. They're just totally worth it. Do a little bit of cleaning on this. Obviously still need to do a little bit more. But I just kind of wanted to fit this on. And I am going to get a little bit of metal tape. I'm going to clean this a little bit better. Put a little metal tape on there so that we don't have just a hole there. At least block the airflow pretty good. A little bit of acetone. If you've never worked with this stuff before, it's just fantastic. I used to be in air conditioning a long time ago and use this stuff pretty extensively. You just rip yourself off the right size piece. Generally doesn't have to be all that pretty. Nice and sticky, and man, I mean, it's strong. It just does what it needs to do. Keeps the air from doing what you don't want. Going out holes and cracks and things. I'm doing. Because, you know, you probably couldn't just imagine this for yourself, I'm sure. Push it down real good, firm it into place. That's going to hold, man. That'll be real good. Another fantastic purchase I made, 200 of these wavy washers that I will need all over the place on this motor. Nice. With the back of the fan shroud secured down, I can get to my oil breather base. I've got 3 screws that come in here, here, and here. And you're supposed to use shake-proof washers on this, but it didn't have them, and I didn't do enough preparation to have what I need. So, you know, I'm gonna like live with a little more disappointment here and just use these again. They held up last time. Certainly worth mentioning. I kind of went ahead and got a little too far here. I'm going to loosen these up just a little bit. So we've got a little motion in this, so that as I'm lining up the rest of the screws, it's easier to do so. Clamp that down. Now with those started, I'm able to cinch those down nice and tight, and then get those nice and tight. And now back up here to finish these guys off. In that order. With that base in position, I can put this dude into position. But before I put it into position, I need to get this guy installed. And as it turns out, the diameter is not really designed to fit over that pipe. So one of my favorite things come into play here. Get that dude on there. And there's your magic of silicone spray. I guarantee that would have been a lot more challenging task without it. And I'm sure there was probably a VW tool for this, which of course I don't own. And you know, I could just like use screwdrivers or whatever, and that may be what I decide to do. That's at least how I'll start. But I may wind up deciding that I need to fabricate something here because I want to get this really good and tight. Okay, so I said maybe start with screwdrivers, but as it turns out, I'm starting with my fingernails. All right, now's the part where it gets real fun because I've done as much as I can do with my fingernails. Now, so far, this is basically working. I've got, you know, a screwdriver shoved in to each side there. But of course, you know, if you put any pressure on them, they're going to want to come in together in the middle. So I've taken this pry bar here, put it in between, and when I turn it up on its edge so that it's not flats hitting the inside of each screwdriver, but it's the tips, I can kind of spin it around and get a pretty decent result. It's kind of doing the trick. It's not the best thing ever, but it's kind of doing the trick. Actually, that's doing a lot better than I kind of thought it would. That's not bad at all. I might just call that good. That's pretty freaking tight. Nice! With that in position, we're supposed to start off with the special washer, which is not to be confused with the washer that goes directly above it. And then after that, we get a spring and a filter and the cap. I've got the spring, I've got the cap, I don't have the filter, and I don't have the washer. So I'm gonna find a washer. The filter, I think I'm gonna use one of those kitchen scrubbies, and I've got the cap. So for now though, this is fine.
What the heck is that? It's like they didn't do any metal work. They just like looped on some Bondo, painted over it, and called it a day. But whatever.
It is rough.
Phil, I mean, mine actually.
I say as I look at my fender.
But this one here actually.
Well, so I found a little bit of time to get into the garage. I made a little bit of time to get back into the garage. I'm so close at this point. The engine is basically together. I've got engine tins that are just filthy, and not just filthy with dirt, but filthy with caked on oil and stuff in certain places. So I got my purple power bath here. I'm just gonna get to scrubbing, and I get to watch Jeremy's new find as I do it. Like, what could be better, right? I've been fortunate enough to make friends with Jeremy offline, and he and I are both in a little message group of type 3 weirdos. So the other day he shared this Facebook Marketplace find, and we all kind of discussed, you know, some of the options he had and whatnot. And I think it was like a day or two later, he sends over a couple of new pictures of the car that weren't in the post, and one of them was the car on a trailer. So I said, hey Jeremy, did you go buy that notchback? Yes, he did. I'm extremely happy for him. So as you can see, some of this stuff is a little bit nastier than others. Naturally, I've already cleaned here. But yeah, that's just pretty nasty. Oh, hello. Now I've got those two and those two complete. Moving on to these guys, and then I'll get those that are nowhere near as bad as all the rest of this stuff. So we're getting somewhere. So here's my fantastic workspace here with, you know, the very best work seat ever. Got these tins degreased. Got that bad boy there degreased. All these guys degreased. And for the most part, all this stuff is fine. I think there's one spot on one of these. Oh yeah, there's like a little bit of a tear right there. I'd like to see if I can weld that up. But what really needs the most work is these guys here. So as you can see, I've got, you know, a nice hole there to screw into the engine block. And then here it's just gone. So I'm going to see if I can't weld something onto there, fix that. And then this thing's just all kinds of jacked up, man. Like, what did it get put into a shredder or something? So right in here we had a little bit of a tear, and we still do, but grabbed my hammer and dolly and got it back into the right position. See if I can get a little weld into there. Well, we're basically just putting this thing all back together and then fixing all the places where the edges aren't right and just cleaning it up real good so it meets perfectly. And so far I'm really happy with it. So this tin for the 1 and 2 cylinders was massively out of shape. I've already kind of done quite a bit to get it corrected. It was, you know, kind of way up in like this whenever this part was sort of where it needed to be. And so I've got it a lot closer here. If I line up this guy, that dude's a whole lot closer to where he needs to be. So I'm just gonna bend it out a little bit more all the time, keep checking it until I get it right where it ought to be. As I'm getting this piece figured out, I knew I wanted to get the top part in so that I could make sure it lines up real good with that and everything. And come to find that it actually needed a fair little bit of manipulation as well, but didn't take too much. I had to squeeze in on the side, right down here toward where the carburetor mounts to the head. And that allows these holes here to line up pretty well. And get this to line up with the fan shroud. And I can see as I was getting this piece in why this part was so especially jacked up. Because if you don't put that end in first, you're going to wind up shoving it in and it's just going to drag along the side of the case here. It's ridiculous. There's actually a groove in the side of the block there that it fits into because it's not really the right size, I guess. I don't know, you know, or is not really sure, you know, whether there's actually, you know, different orientations or different years or what, but it definitely sticks out too much. Maybe it dug in on its own and created that, or maybe somebody created that groove so that it would fit. Not really sure, but we're about to find out how well this all fits. All right, check this out. I've got these two screws holding these two pieces together. They're nice and perfectly flat. Come down to here. That hole lines up perfectly. That hole needs only the most minimal amount of pushing to get that into line. Come around to this piece. This guy is screwed in. I haven't put the one down here in yet, but that's going to line up great. And I don't even have these screws in yet, but they're lined up perfectly and they're pushed down into position perfectly. That tin is about as good as you could hope for, I think. I've come out here a couple nights in a row and just struggled to figure out what I'm still missing about welding thin sheet metal. Went to Aaron's shop today and he was really busy. Of course, he didn't bother to tell me that. I just had to see it for myself. But, you know, he wasn't going to be able to spend hours teaching me. But what he did do is just took care of it. And I got to watch. And my God, I learned so much just by paying attention. And then, of course, he summarized it all at the end and really, you know, just a wealth of knowledge. I came home with the original tab on this tin, welded over and, you know, like complete basically, but it was just a mess. And I, you know, take the flap wheel to it, start cleaning it up. And it just got real thin all of a sudden. I mean, really thin, like razor thin. And I just wasn't able to bring it back. But I was able to just grab a new tab here, create it, and weld it on. And, you know, two nights ago out here, if I would have tried to do this, it just would have been a complete disaster. And this thing is far from pretty, but man, to me, it looks really pretty because, I mean, like, it worked. And yeah, it's good. So I'm thrilled. I think that's kind of the hump right there, man. I'm over it. And, you know, I could have some level of confidence welding, you know, sheet metal and stuff because I'm doing it. It's pretty fantastic. Very excited. Yet another new part from my ISP West purchase that will be going in place. And I found it interesting, the documentation, the parts book, shows these screws as being M6. And they absolutely are not M6. They're definitely M8. And I don't think that anyone drilled these out and tapped them. I think they were always M8. So that's curious. I don't know if anybody knows about that. Let me know. I'd be curious. Saw this method of putting it into the drill somewhere, I don't know, but pretty effective. Take it down to a good size and force it into here and create some threads on it. Whether it actually works to create threads, it wasn't even my original goal. I just wanted something to jam down into there. But I'm going to screw this down into here after cutting off the non-threaded part there. Let it stay sticking up in this hole here while I fill this channel that was somehow created in the engine block with some steel stick. A little wire wheel action. Get this guy started. This stuff is so fun. All right, I'm sure that better work is possible and has almost certainly been done, but I think it will be good enough at the very least. Let that cure up. In case there's any question about what happened here, that thing just fits down in there perfectly. So we're going to do this one a little bit differently. I feel like I wish I should have thought of this better idea on the other side first. I got a lot more threads on this one, and I'm leaving the top there so I can just kind of screw it down until it's real good and tight. There will be plenty of threads above where I need them to be, and once it's all cured up and everything, I might even be able to just twist it out with this. That's fairly ugly, I'll be the first one to admit it. Built it up a little high, and then I'm going to come knock it down with a flap wheel, and we'll just see how it turns out. It's not super critical. It is now time for me to pull my dowel out of here and see what has become of the threads I hoped to create. Oh, I am optimistic. I'll tell you what, looking at that, I think it probably worked. I think I probably built threads into that steel stick. I'm going to grind her flat and then see if my screws thread nice. Is it the most perfect and beautiful repair ever? Yeah, I don't think it is, but look at that. Oh, come on, baby. Let's just see what happens here. Oh, brother. Look at that. Look at that. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's smooth all the way down. Oh, that is fantastic. Was it smarter to go with a longer piece of wood like I did on the other side? I'm going to go with yes. Now I'm going to dig this out of here. All right, for anyone not familiar, on the Type 3 motor, you've got these vent flaps here that, you know, would normally stay closed, and then there'd be a linkage arm going over and ultimately connecting to your thermostat at the bottom side of your head. And, you know, when it finally got hot enough in here in your head, well, it would lift these flaps up. But, you know, it seems to be a thing that, like, a lot of people do, and the previous owner had it done this way, so I'm just going to do the same thing because I don't have a thermostat. And, you know, maybe there's good reason why people started doing this. I live in a occasionally cold climate. I haven't really had any issues with, you know, getting the engine up to temperature. So we're just wiring this thing open. So we've got this groove in the block back here that the engine tin wants to fit into. Maybe the engine tin made that groove, maybe it was already there, I really don't know. But what I do know is that this was just all kinds of jacked up. And what I noticed is that, you know, if you tried to just put your engine tin straight down, you would jack that up. It's important to tilt it back and get that into position first. and then let the front side come down. Makes things a whole lot easier on yourself. Just a general rule with stuff like this, like if you're having to fight it, stop and look and see why. You shouldn't have to fight stuff. After getting that guy started, come over to the side, and right after telling you, you shouldn't have to fight stuff. Well, you know, you do have to kind of pinch this together and get the hole to line up, you know, before you can get this guy in. And I had to, you know, pinch it pretty hard, get that screw going, get it most of the way in, then come back up to this guy, tighten it all the way, come back over here, tighten it all the way. And now I'll get these two screws. And yes, I did have to shove my tin over, put some force onto it to get, you know, these holes to line up. Same deal, start that one, don't go all the way down, get that one started, then take them both down. Starting to come along. Very carefully lined up the keyway and wiggled gently around until I got a nice start. And now we're just gonna tap, tap, tap this dude on here. And no, I don't have a proper dead blow hammer, so I'm using this silly thing, but you know, it'll work. Here's another one of those items that the previous builder decided was optional. I disagree. Got a seal that goes here, and then a shim before the pulley. Or more appropriately, put the shim on, put the seal on the pulley. Kind of tight. Make sure I don't ruin it, but yeah. Make sure that dowel pin goes into that hole. Good to go. And getting this angle right is challenging, but basically I'm just getting on either side of this thing and just kind of walking it in, wiggling one side to the other until it's far enough in that I can get my bolt in. And yes, I'm going to throw some oil onto these threads. .30 millimeter. Now, all that wiggling wasn't quite enough, so I just grabbed this scrap 2x4 here and lay it up against this pulley and use a regular everyday hammer. Just smack it a few times. And so we're catching threads now. Silicone. Fairly certain this is the first time I'm ever doing this operation with the engine in this orientation. Ought to be interesting. Something kind of fun happened. I had, you know, put this cover back on after draining the oil, just to kind of do everything on the stand. And it kept leaking, and I was kind of getting a little bit upset about it, but I wasn't going to deal with it until it was time to put the engine back together. And just like, why is it leaking? You know, I mean, it's like there's not really that much oil in there and whatever. Well, when I pulled the cover off, this was sandwiched between the cover and the engine block. That could have caused a little bit of leaking. Makes me feel a little bit better about the situation. You may have heard me mention before the idea that the Type 3 was a definite upgrade, and it absolutely is, but here's one place where I feel like it really struggles, man. When you're strapping down your generator, you push this guy down and, okay, well, there's the stud. But when you go to start the nut, it just wants to slam up against the side of this strap, and it's really challenging to get it started until you realize that what you have to do is not only push that thing down, but also in. Shove in at the base of that strap while you start your nut, and it'll make all the difference. There, kind of hard to video it while using two hands to do it. Now I will say, I got to push in pretty darned hard, and I've got, relatively big hands and a fair bit of strength in them. So, pushing in may not seem like it's going to do enough. And if you have to, get something to get that extra force down on there. Grab a tool and push with that or whatever. And it will make the difference. But man, this can be a real challenge here. This step is just about as obvious as it can be. As it turns out, this was pretty darn clean anyway, but you'd want to really make sure you go over this very carefully. Make sure that there's no previous gasket left behind or anything. Use a razor blade very carefully or whatever. But we're not even in a situation where we need to do that because it's just super smooth and flat and clean. Everything's real nice there. And then I got this new to me nose cone that does have the provision for the reverse switch, which is the whole reason I'm putting it on here. And as it turns out, it's got a really nice flat surface too. So I'm just gonna wipe it down real good, get the gasket in there, make it happen. Easy. Oh, yeah, also make sure that hole's not plugged. That's, super critical as it turns out. Don't let that hole be plugged. Now here's the only other part that could be considered tricky at all. You got to make sure that you get your shift fork selector or whatever into these gaps right here. Let me show you what I mean. There's this channel right in here. It needs to be in there so that when it pushes or pulls, it actually grabs these shift selectors. So it's going to help to kind of push it out a little bit. Now I can stick it in there where it needs to go. Kind of push it back through. And out here, I can grab hold and kind of pull it through as I'm pushing the nose cone into position. Real smooth. Love it. And we can just start getting these guys into position. I'm just snugging these down, getting them all started. Just enough pressure on the piece to keep it secure. And then I'm just going to really easily start to take this to a higher torque, little by little, going around evenly. All right, so those are all just barely beyond snug. And now I'll just go a little bit further with each one of them. I see no point in not just taking a little bit of extra time. It's going to save me time down the road for sure to just get a really even torque on this gasket. Now I'll actually look up the torque spec and, do it to spec, but that's a really good start right there.
As always, I really do appreciate everyone who continues to watch my adventures, follow along with my passion for this little car of mine. Let me know what I'm doing right. Let me know what I'm doing wrong. Tell me about your cat. I don't care.